Welcome to Metabolism Month on Simple Science. I'm Dr. Mike Axler, PhD in kinesiology and applied physiology, professor of exercise science, and 60-plus time marathoner and ultramarathoner. Over the next 4 episodes, we'll be discussing metabolism, what it is, how it works, and how you can intelligently manipulate certain training and dietary variables with evidence-based strategies to maximize your health, performance, and body composition goals. In this series, you will learn what metabolism really means, the major drivers of your total daily energy expenditure, or your TDEE, common misunderstandings pertaining to metabolism and how we can utilize core scientific principles to increase our own metabolic rates, why quote-unquote slow metabolism is usually a misunderstanding rather than something people believe to be set in stone by their genetics, how metabolic knowledge supports fat loss, muscle gain, performance, and longevity, and lastly, if phrases like starvation mode or metabolic adaptation have ever left you puzzled or feeling powerless, this month may be for you. Last month, we built on the groundwork in Muscle Month, exploring cellular drivers of muscle growth and mTOR activation, training variables for hypertrophy, which included volume, intensity, tempo, and frequency. We also discussed nutrition protocols, which included protein timing, carbs for performance, fats for hormonal health, and evidence-backed supplements. In addition to a whole lot more detail with regard for maximizing our rest and recovery to put our bodies in the optimal state, physiologically, hormonally, and metabolically, in order to pack on as much strong, healthy, and efficient muscle as possible. So if you have not yet watched the Muscle Month series, then I'd highly recommend you do that before watching this Metabolism Month series, because this month is going to strongly build off of the core concepts we covered in the 4 Muscle Month episodes. In our first episode of Metabolism Month, aka the video you're watching right now or the podcast you're listening to, what you will learn today is what metabolism really is, not just in theory, but in real applicable terms. These include the major components which make up your total daily energy expenditure, what most people get wrong about metabolism and how we can reframe that, why you probably don't have a slow metabolism and what the science really shows, and why understanding metabolism is essential for fat loss, muscle gain, performance, and of course, longevity. If you are new here, please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the like button, and sharing this episode with a friend. This month is packed with actionable episodes on everything from exercise and metabolism to fasting, dieting myths, and long-term metabolic health. And also, don't forget to check out Muscle Month. If you missed it, it is the metabolic groundwork, so to speak, that we will be building off of today. Let's first start off talking today by defining metabolism. Metabolism encompasses every chemical reaction in the body that keeps you alive, from converting food into usable energy to synthesizing and repairing tissues. These processes operate 24/7, even when you're fast asleep. And this is going to be a big part here, is that metabolism is split into 2 broad categories. The first is anabolism, or if you think about the term anabolic. This means to build molecules and store energy. Conversely, we have catabolism, or catabolic. This means breaking down molecules to release energy. At the cellular level, metabolic efficiency depends on hormonal signals, mitochondrial function, and enzyme activity. Far more nuanced than simply having a quote-unquote fast or slow metabolism, so to speak. It is important to note that metabolism does fluctuate over our lifespans and responds to factors far beyond genetics or exercise alone. And then that's largely what we'll be talking about in today's episode. In real world terms, your metabolism equals your total daily energy expenditure, or your TDEE. These are the total calories you burn in a 24-hour period. TDEE is the main metric for managing weight, body composition, and performance goals. Even two people with identical body weights can have TDEE differences of hundreds of calories. Variables including muscle mass, movement habits, and meal composition all play a role. So let's now discuss the 4 pillars or variables which do make up your total daily energy expenditure. The first main variable is going to be your BMR, or your basal metabolic rate. Your basal metabolic rate is the energy needed to sustain vital functions, from breathing to circulation to brain activity while at rest. And BMR accounts for around 60 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure and does vary by age, sex, and lean mass. The second variable is going to be your TEF, or your thermic effect of food. These are the calories burned digesting, absorbing, and metabolizing nutrients. The thermic effect of food generally represents around 8 to 12% of your total daily energy expenditure and is highest for protein due to its complex breakdown and absorption pathways. The third variable, which plays into your total daily energy expenditure, is going to be NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. All the energy you expend outside of formal workouts, etc., for example, walking to your car, fidgeting, standing up, sitting down, tapping your leg annoyingly, doing household chores, etc. NEAT can range from 200 to 2,000 plus calories per day, depending on how active you are. If you're a stone statue who can just sit still, your NEAT's not going to be very high. But if you have ants in your pants, your NEAT can be through the roof. And I'm definitely on the latter half there. And NEAT is an incredibly powerful tool to wield for weight management. And the last variable, which factors into your total daily energy expenditure, is your exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT. Your exercise activity thermogenesis is the calories burned during intentional exercise, such as strength training, running, cycling, Zumba classes, high intensity interval classes, and your EAT varies widely based on your workout type, your workout intensity, and your workout duration. Now that we've defined these terms, let's talk about BMR, NEAT, TEF, and EAT more specifically. First up is basal metabolic rate. Your basal metabolic rate, as we had said, is the energy your body needs at complete rest to keep you alive, powering breathing, circulation, and brain activity, in addition to thermoregulation, DNA replication, turnover of cells. You get the point. BMR is measured in a thermoneutral environment in a fasted state while lying still, basically the bare minimum cost, so to speak, of being alive. BMR typically accounts for around 60 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure, making it by far the largest contributor to compared with exercise or other components. The first main point that I do want to bring up about BMR is that BMR does naturally decline with age due to lean mass loss and various hormonal shifts. As we get older, two main factors cause BMR to trend downwards. The first is a loss of lean muscle mass and muscular strength known as sarcopenia, something that we talked a whole lot about during the Muscle Month series. Starting as early as your early 30s, most adults lose anywhere from 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade before this quickly accelerates after age 60. Since muscle tissue is highly metabolically active, burning off around 13 calories per kilogram per day, Even modest losses can significantly reduce daily energy requirements. And the second factor, causing drops in BMR, include hormonal shifts. More specifically, growth hormone, testosterone, and estrogen, all of these levels gradually do decline with age, all of which influence muscle protein synthesis and overall metabolic activity. Thyroid hormone activity can also become less efficient, subtly affecting resting calorie burn. This is why two people of the same weight but different muscle to fat ratios can have vastly different BMRs, and why weight alone does not tell you much about your metabolic rate. The second main point that I want to bring up about BMR is that resistance training can help preserve or even increase BMR by maintaining muscle mass. Muscle is the only metabolic tissue that you can voluntarily increase. Lifting heavy enough to cause progressive overload promotes myofibrillar hypertrophy, which expands metabolically active tissue. This is a process we discussed quite thoroughly in the first episode of Muscle Month, so make sure to go back and watch that. Following intense resistance training, resting metabolic rate remains elevated for upwards of 24 to 48 hours due to elevated post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC. Essentially your body's repair and rebuild period, which can result in the burning of extra fuel in the form of calories. This means your lifting sessions aren't just burning calories while you train, they're increasing the baseline burn 24/7 by preserving your biggest metabolic organ. And the third point that I want to bring up about BMR is that small improvements in muscle mass can translate into meaningful calorie burn increases over time. Because BMR runs all day, small changes do add up. The first main point, adding just 2 to 3 kilograms or around 4 to 7 pounds of lean muscle can increase resting energy expenditure by around 25 to 40 calories per kilogram per day. That's an extra 50 to 120 calories burned daily without any change in physical activity. Over a year, that's roughly 18,000 to 43,000 additional calories, equivalent to roughly 5 to 12 pounds of body fat, simply from having more muscle on your frame. When paired with a higher NEAT and structured training, this compounding effect becomes even more pronounced. And it may help to think of muscle as a long-term metabolic investment. Even small deposits made consistently through training and protein intake compound into noticeable changes in body composition over the years. Awesome. Now that we've talked thoroughly about BMR, let's now get into NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. NEAT, as we had detailed before, covers all unplanned movement outside of formal workouts. So things such as walking between meetings, fidgeting, household chores, standing, tapping your hand on the desk. The variability does, however, does vary enormously. Anywhere from 200 to 2,000 plus calories per day, depending on your lifestyle. In previous videos, I discussed how I have a standing desk with a walking pad underneath of it. I set the belt to around 2.5 miles an hour, and over a 4 to 8 hour workday, I can easily walk 10 to 20 miles, and all of that calorie burn doesn't include my weight training and 1 to 2 hours of cardio. And on those days, I can easily eat around 4,000 calories or more. So again, a hack, so to speak, is to increase your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And a tip which may help is to set a timer every hour to stand and move for 5 minutes. Walk for 5 minutes, do 5 minutes of jumping jacks, 5 minutes of bodyweight squats, 5 minutes of bodyweight lunges, 5 minutes of push-ups, which is very tiring if you try to do push-ups for 5 consecutive minutes. If you do this over a 12-hour day, that's an extra hour or 60 minutes of low intensity or high intensity, depending on the exercise you choose, of physical activity, which is completely outside of the gym. Third on our list, let's dive a little bit further into TEF, which is the thermic effect of food. TEF is the energy costs of digesting, absorbing, and metabolizing nutrients. TEF represents roughly 10% of total daily energy expenditure, but the macronutrient distribution matters. This is why a calorie is not just a calorie. For example, protein's thermic effect of food is 20 to 30%, meaning for every 100 calories of dietary protein you ingest, you burn off around 20 to 30 of those calories just processing them. Further, carbohydrates have a thermic effect of food of around 5 to 10%, and dietary fats have a thermic effect of food around 0 to 3%. Now, there's three main reasons why high protein diets can improve body composition, and they all deal with the thermic effect of food if you haven't yet guessed. First is elevated calorie burn. Every gram of protein demands more energy to digest and metabolize it. Compared to dietary fats or carbs, protein's high thermic effect of food means you net fewer usable calories per gram consumed, and that extra energy burned can add up to hundreds of calories per day. Further, appetite regulation and satiety. Dietary proteins trigger the release of satiety hormones, including PYY, GLP-1, and leptin, and can dampen ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, helping you to feel fuller for a longer period of time. This hormonal shift reduces overall calorie intake naturally, making it easier to maintain a leaner body composition without rigid dieting. And third, lean mass preservation. During calorie deficits, high protein diets spare muscle tissue by supplying ample amino acids for both repair and growth. Since muscle is metabolically active, preserving or building lean mass sustains a higher BMR and blunts the metabolic slowdown that often does accompany weight loss. Now, for athletes specifically, a lower fat, moderate carbohydrate diet can be advantageous both for performance and for body composition. The first reason why this is because there is a limited fat gain despite higher carb intakes. When athletes consume moderate to high carbohydrates alongside controlled dietary fat intake, the body will prioritize carbohydrates for immediate energy and glycogen replenishment. With training sessions creating a substantial energy deficit, dietary fats, though energy dense, are far less likely to be stored. The second reason why higher carbohydrates and lower fat diets, along with ample dietary proteins, are advantageous for athletes is because through regular resistance and endurance training, there is a heightened upregulation of GLUT4 transporters and enzymes involved in glycogen synthesis, shuttling ingested carbs into muscle cells rather than adipose tissue. This improved insulin sensitivity ensures that higher carbohydrate intakes do support performance and recovery and not necessarily fat gain. And third, there is a synergy between the thermic effect of food and non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Combining a higher protein, lower fat diet with abundant NEAT and structured training can really increase total calorie burn. The increased thermic effect of food from protein, the day-long movement from NEAT, and the exercise-driven exercise activity thermogenesis creates a metabolic environment where even a carb-rich meal is used productively, fueling workouts and muscle recovery rather than contributing to it sitting on your hips or around your waistline. And a tip which may help is to build each meal around a protein source that delivers 30 to 40 grams of protein. Further, you can fill half your plate with fruits and veggies and keep healthy fats coming from things like avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds moderate. This meal structure maximizes the thermic effect of food, supports satiety, and channels carbohydrates into performance and recovery, setting your metabolism in motion for both fat loss and muscle gain, and or what we call body recomposition. Lastly, more on EAT or exercise activity thermogenesis. As a quick refresher, EAT is the energy you expend through intentional physical activity, everything from structured resistance training and cardio sessions to yoga, martial arts, team sports, Zumba, things of that nature. Unlike NEAT, which covers spontaneous movement, EAT is planned, purposeful, and often designed to improve fitness or performance. Your exercise activity thermogenesis typically ranges between 5 and 15% of your total daily energy expenditure, but its contribution can swing widely depending on training volume, intensity, and duration. To start off, exercise activity thermogenesis is the most variable total daily energy expenditure component, driven primarily by training type, frequency, and intensity. Some people can train intensely 5, 6, or even 7 days per week, whereas others may only have 1 or 2 lighter sessions. This can create huge differences in daily calorie expenditure. For training type, we know that HIIT training or high intensity interval training and heavy strength sessions tend to have greater total energy costs, including EPOC, compared to low intensity steady state cardio, though both have value depending on goals. For frequency, doubling your weekly training from 2 sessions to 4 essentially doubles your exercise activity thermogenesis output, assuming volume and intensity are constant. For the session length and density variables, a 60-minute weight training session with short rest intervals can burn nearly as much as a longer, moderate-paced run, especially when you factor in that afterburn effect, or EPOC. This is why athletes and very active individuals often have enormous calorie intakes, yet maintain low body fat percentages. Their EAT, or exercise activity thermogenesis, component dwarfs that of the average sedentary person, who also may not eat as healthfully. Further, it is important to note that EAT interacts with NEAT and recovery, but sometimes in surprising ways. One thing many people miss is that a big boost in EAT does not always equal a proportional bump in total daily burn. Please let me explain. Some individuals, for example, unconsciously move less throughout the day following a hard workout, sitting more, taking fewer steps, which can partially offset exercise activity thermogenesis's calorie burn. Conversely, an intelligently programmed mix of strength and cardio can keep NEAT high and accelerate recovery through improved circulation, mobility, and joint health. Over time, your body becomes more efficient at repeated exercise, burning slightly fewer calories from the same workload, a reminder to vary intensity and training style to keep the stimulus fresh and high. And it may help to think of EAT and NEAT as teammates. If you push one too hard, the other might slack off. Balancing both keeps your total burn steady without driving yourself into exhaustion. Lastly, I have an expanded tip, which is to structure your training to maximize exercise activity thermogenesis without sabotaging recovery or NEAT. So to get the most from EAT in your total daily energy expenditure equation, first, focus on progressive overload in your resistance training, adding weight, reps, and or sets over time keeps muscle stimuli and EPOC high. Further, include a mix of energy systems. Blend lower intensity sessions, which are great for active recovery and NEAT preservation, with higher intensity workouts for an increase in metabolism. Third, monitor for NEAT drop-off. You can track your steps or general activity on training versus non-training days to spot if your daily movement dips following workouts. Fourth is seasonal periodization. If you are in a high training phase, such as marathon prep or a muscle gain block or a strength gaining block, adjust calorie intake to match the temporary spike in exercise activity thermogenesis. And lastly, fuel and recover well. Strategic pre- and post-workout nutrition maintains training quality, preventing the slow creep of reduced session output over time. And it may help to think of your planned workouts as the headline calorie burner, but keeping the supporting articles, such as NEAT, recovery, and variety, in place so your training does not just burn calories in the short term, but drives adaptation over the long term. Okay, further on this, now let's get on into metabolic flexibility, which is a term I've discussed in previous videos. Maybe you've heard about it before, maybe you haven't. Let's talk about metabolic flexibility versus metabolic inflexibility or dysfunction. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to seamlessly shift between using carbohydrates and fats as fuel, depending on availability and demand. Think of it as having a well-tuned hybrid engine. You can run efficiently on high-octane carbohydrates during sprints or after a carb-rich meal, and you can smoothly switch to diesel, fat stores during fasting, low-intensity activity, or overnight. In healthy, trained individuals, this switch happens rapidly and without major metabolic lag time, so to speak. We can measure the metabolic flexibility by looking at the respiratory quotient, or the RQ. A high respiratory quotient of around 0.9 to 1.0 after eating carbohydrates, and a low respiratory quotient of around 0.7 when fasting or relying on fat. The faster and more completely your respiratory quotient shifts between these ranges, the more metabolically flexible you are. Now, I have 4 reasons why this matters. The first, flexible metabolisms respond to insulin efficiently, clearing glucose into muscle and liver when carbs are plentiful, then transitioning to fat oxidation when glucose is low. Second, athletes with higher metabolic flexibility can spare glycogen during long efforts, preserving high-intensity bursts for when they're needed most. Third, mitochondrial efficiency and training. Training both endurance and resistance increases mitochondrial density and the activity of key enzymes, for example, CPT1 for fat oxidation and PDH for carbohydrate metabolism. This is widening your fuel range. And fourth, hormonal support. Quality sleep stabilizes insulin and cortisol rhythms, while consistent training keeps GLUT4 transporters more active, which are both necessary for smooth switching between fuel sources. This adaptability is protective not just for athletes, it also supports healthy aging because metabolic flexibility is linked to lower risks of type 2 diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. On the opposite end of the spectrum is metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction is, in many ways, metabolic inflexibility. Here, the body is sort of stuck in a narrow fuel usage range, unable to efficiently oxidize fat when carbs are not abundant, or over-relying on carbohydrates even when at rest. Some physiological signs of metabolic dysfunction include a persistently elevated respiratory quotient while in a fasted state, indicating poor fat oxidation capacity. Further is insulin resistance. Glucose is not being cleared from the body efficiently, so the body compensates with chronically higher insulin levels, which in turn suppresses fat breakdown or lipolysis. And third is mitochondrial impairment. Fewer and less efficient mitochondria reduce oxidative capacity, forcing reliance on anaerobic glycolysis even in low demand states. Now, some of the root causes and reinforcing loops of this can include intramuscular lipid accumulation. So unlike trained athletes who can store and use fat efficiently within muscle, untrained or insulin-resistant individuals do accumulate lipid droplets that interfere with insulin signaling, a phenomenon often called lipotoxicity. Further, chronic low-grade inflammation. Elevated cytokines, which include TNF-alpha and IL-6 in their pro-inflammatory states, can disrupt insulin receptor signaling, particularly through serine phosphorylation of IRS1, further locking the body into glucose dependence. And lastly, on some root causes of metabolic dysfunction is the reduction in mitochondrial biogenesis. Without the stimulus from physical activity, PGC1 alpha activity drops, leading to fewer new mitochondria and worsening inefficiency. So the vicious cycle thus becomes, first, poor fat oxidation means carbohydrates are used preferentially, even while at rest. Then, constant carbohydrate reliance promotes further fat storage, increasing intramuscular and visceral fat, and then this fat drives more inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunctioning, worsening insulin resistance and reducing flexibility further. Breaking this cycle requires dual stimuli of training to restore mitochondrial function and fat oxidation pathways, and nutrition to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammatory load. Some practical levers to improve metabolic flexibility include: first is to train across fuel zones. Include both high-intensity work to improve carbohydrate handling and lower-intensity fasted or glycogen-depleted sessions to train fat oxidation. Next is to focus on recovery. Quality sleep and stress management maintain the hormonal signals of insulin and cortisol that regulate substrate usage. And lastly, support mitochondrial health. Adequate protein, omega-3 fatty acids, polyphenol-rich plants, and micronutrients like magnesium and B vitamins all play roles in energy metabolism. Now let's get into debunking some slow metabolism myths, because I think a lot of people have this idea that they can't lose body fat and gain muscle mass, so increase their body composition because they blame it on a slow metabolism. They might believe they need 2,000 calories a day or need 3,000 calories a day, and they might think that they're being very honest with their intake and very honest and truthful with their output, but there might be some myths, and maybe some of these can help you and you can kind of vibe with them as well. So myth number one is you're eating less and burning more. So most people do unintentionally underreport intake and overestimate burn, creating a believable but misleading story that my metabolism is slow. So where calorie intake may hide. Number one, the big factor is going to be liquid calories. So things like lattes or whatever you're putting in your coffee, various juices you might drink, cocktails, sports drinks, sodas, all of that can add up really quickly. Further, various add-ons and BLTs, so bite, licks, and tastes. Maybe you're putting oils or salad dressings on things, or you're doing a little dipping sauces of like honey mustard or regular mustard or ketchup, that adds up. Things like healthy nuts and nut butters, if you're constantly snacking throughout the day, if you were to really weigh out how much you're snacking on in terms of calories, it can be pretty wild. Further is portion creep. Again, on this is restaurant portions versus entries log. So if you're looking on the back of some food item on a food label and you see that some food is however many grams or however many cups measured in dry measuring cups or liquid measuring cups versus what you're kind of just, putting on your plate, there can be huge discrepancies there. And the last place where intake can hide is the weekend effect. And these are going to be cheat meals and cheat days. So having consistently 300 to 500 to 1,000 calories plus, maybe on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, getting that bowl of ice cream each of those nights before you go to bed. You go out to lunch with your friends, you get a little cocktail or whatever. Having 500 to 1,000 calorie surplus Friday, Saturday, and Sunday can very quickly erase a modest 100 or 200 calorie deficit on each weekday. Further, on where calorie intake can be inflated, wearables and machines. So cardio machines and gyms like treadmills, stair steppers, recumbent bikes, ellipticals, a lot of those will say that you're burning off way more calories than you really are. And even trackers like the Apple Watch and Whoop and the Oura Ring and things like that. And for context, the marathon, the 26.2 mile road race, is considered the hardest thing you can do, obviously, until Ironman triathlon were created and ultramarathons were created. But the average person can burn off around 3,000 calories running 26.2 miles consecutively, which is very exhausting. But I've had no shortage of friends, clients, and students who play baseball. And baseball is very difficult, and I love baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan. But baseball is a lot of standing around, a lot of sitting around, waiting for your turn to bat. And people will say that they burn off 5,000 calories during baseball games. And that's just, it's physiologically impossible unless the baseball game's going on for several days or you're literally just running for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, because if 26.2 miles of running burns off 3,000 calories, standing out in left field is not going to be burning off more calories than that. Further, energy can be conflated, or energy burn is inflated, with constrained energy models. As training rises, our bodies often compensate by reducing other outputs such as NEAT, blunting net burn, as which we discussed before, and even intensity confusions. If you're just training by feel, some folks will log their workouts as being vigorous when the actual heart rate and power output were just moderate or maybe even light. But here's what you can do to potentially fix this problem, and it's just going to be a self-audit of around 1 to 2 weeks. So you can weigh and log everything you eat. Just be very consistent and very honest with yourself. Include all the dipping sauces you do, all the olive oil, the ketchup, the honey mustard, all of the salad dressing you put on your salads, all of your beverages, all the creamer that you put in your coffee, any alcohol, any bites, any handfuls of chips and nuts and pretzels you might take throughout the day. Log everything. And if it's too annoying to log, then don't snack. It's easy as that. You could also track your steps and your sitting time to look at your NEAT and how it can drop or how it can increase on certain days. And then use trend data. You can weigh yourself every day, but look at like a 1 or 2 week period. Don't look at the day-to-day fluctuations, as day-to-day weight can vary widely based on water weight and the amount of sodium you're having, the amount of fiber you're having, the amount of stress you're under. So look at that 1 or 2 week trend. Another myth is that people might think they have hypothyroidism. They'll blame their thyroid gland for not having six-pack abs. So we know that true hypothyroidism very much does exist, but is the exception, and the typical resting energy drop is modest relative to daily intake swings. What thyroid-driven slowdown may look like. The magnitude is roughly a 140 to 350 calorie per day reduction in resting energy expenditure, which is meaningful but rarely sufficient to explain large, sustained weight gain alone. Symptoms of hypothyroidism can include fatigue, cold intolerance, dry skin and hair, constipation, low mood, often with menstrual cycle changes in women. Testing reality. Day-to-day BMR measurements can vary, which is a single low reading does not confirm dysfunction. So if you're not clinically diagnosed with hypothyroidism, you probably can't blame your thyroid from the fact that you might not look and perform and feel the way you want to feel. So why most variation is not thyroid related. Lean mass rules BMR as we know. So organs and muscles drive the bulk of basal metabolic rate in the burn. So more lean mass equals a higher BMR. Further, the age, sex, and body size effects. Predictable differences explain much of person-to-person variability. And other common culprits: low energy availability, sleep apnea, high stress, certain medications such as some antidepressants and beta blockers can all nudge energy balance unfavorably. So some smart next steps, if you do think that you have some kind of thyroid issue, is to ask your doctor to check your TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone, as well as free T4, and if indicated, free T3. You could also do your homework. Don't skip out on weight training. Get to the gym 3 to 5 days per week. Get in enough dietary protein, get enough high quality sleep, and manage your stress. These can help move your BMR and appetite regulation in your favor. Expect modest BMR shifts. Focus on weekly energy balance and body composition trends rather than chasing perfect BMR numbers. And lastly, myth number 3, adaptive thermogenesis halts fat loss. Metabolic adaptation is real, but usually modest and manageable with the right plan. What actually adapts? RMR, or the resting metabolic rate, which often drops around 5 to 15% with weight loss, partly from a smaller body, partly from hormonal shifts, such as leptin, thyroid, sympathetic tone, etc. NEAT can also shift. This is the big wild card that we've been talking about in today's episode. This spontaneous movement frequently falls during dieting because you have less energy availability and you're more tired, sometimes by upwards of hundreds of calories per day. And thermic effect of food and deficiency. Less food equates with a lower thermic effect of food. Repeated exercise can become more efficient, marginally reducing cost. So why plateaus happen and how to break them? Hitting compensation. Fewer steps, people can sit more, they do smaller unconscious movements, blunting the intended deficit. People can also overshoot refeeds, as we had discussed. Having cheat meals or cheat days or cheat weekends can erase a week's deficit in one sitting and can make you overshoot your daily or weekly calorie goal. And diet fatigue. Sleep and stress compound and degrade adherence and increase hunger and not just metabolism. So your mitigation playbook, so to speak: keep lifting heavy. Preserve muscle to protect RMR and improve positioning or partitioning. Hold a moderate deficit. 10 to 20% below maintenance outperforms crash diets for adherence and lean mass. Set a NEAT floor. Daily step targets of around 7,000 to 12,000 calories can really offer a lot of NEAT benefits. Prioritize your protein first. Around 1.6 to 2.4 grams per kilogram per day supports satiety, thermic effect of food, and lean mass. Strategic pauses such as diet breaks or higher carb refeeds can improve training quality and adherence for some, even if they don't reset your metabolism, so to speak. And lastly is sleep and stress. Look to get in 7 to 9 hours of high quality sleep each night, along with stress reduction tools such as breath work, walks, sunlight. This can all tame hunger and support your hormonal milieu. So the key takeaway from this myth-busting session is weight gain is almost always a result of chronic, slight calorie surpluses, far more than can be explained by the excuse of a slow metabolism. What you can do is focus on accurate tracking, lean mass preservation, and sustainable habits rather than searching for hidden metabolic saboteurs or just plain excuses. Alrighty, so some summaries and practical takeaways. Increase NEAT to increase daily energy expenditure. Everyday movements, such as walking, standing, fidgeting, can create a 2,000 plus calorie per day spread between individuals. Take phone calls standing or while pacing. Get a walking desk. Park further from entrances or use stairways whenever possible. Swap seated breaks for short walks or gentle stretches. And one of my personal favorites, in addition to my walking desk, is to only watch TV while on a walking pad, a treadmill, or a stationary bike. That's also what I do, and it either really prevents me from watching TV mindlessly or just also jacks up my calorie burn throughout the day. So however you'd like to look at it, maybe it can help you. And these small habits do compound. Don't just brush them off. Making for formal exercise more effective by raising your baseline energy burn. Further, preserve muscle mass with protein and resistance training. Skeletal muscle drives roughly 20% of your resting metabolic rate. Losing lean tissue during dieting drags your metabolism down. Lift weights 2 to 4 times per week, alternating full body and target sessions. Look to get in at least 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight daily from complete protein sources to support muscle repair and growth. And further on this, use progressive overload. And check out the Muscle Month series to learn all about progressive overload. Gradually increase your weight, reps, and sets to keep your muscles adapting. Further, nail down your sleep, strength, and stress management. Poor sleep and high cortisol reroute fuel storage towards fat, impairing insulin sensitivity and eroding your metabolic flexibility. What you can do, and probably should do, is commit to getting 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep each night by creating a dark, cool, and technology-free bedroom. Also start doing more relaxation techniques such as deep breathing, meditation, or even yoga, and stretching to blunt cortisol spikes whenever you need throughout the day. Schedule strength workouts early in the day when possible to take advantage of daytime alertness and hormonal spikes. We should know that recovery isn't optional. It is the very necessary component that allows our training and nutrition to translate into a faster metabolism. Further, accept that we all have adaptive and trainable metabolisms. Your metabolism is not a broken clock. It is a dial you can turn up, turn down with lifestyle inputs. When you add muscle, move more throughout the day, and dial in your sleep, your body responds by raising caloric needs. During calorie cuts, couple resistance training and high protein to minimize this metabolic drop. Track trends over weeks rather than obsessing over daily fluctuations. Remember, consistency in these core pillars of metabolism can help to reshape your resting energy expenditure and substrate usage over time. So next steps, log your non-exercise activity with a simple step counter or a smartphone app, and I think most phones already log step counts and even convert them into miles and kilometers. Build a 4-week progressive resistance training plan tailored to your current fitness level. Experiment with sleep tracking tools like wearables and smartphone apps to uncover and correct patterns. And check out guided stress management practices like breathwork apps or even journaling Awesome. Let's now land this plane on Metabolism Month, episode number 1. To wrap up today's deep dive, we started by defining what metabolism is, not just in theory, but in the real, everyday sense of how your body uses energy. We discussed the 4 pillars or variables of total daily energy expenditure, which are your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, your NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, TEF, thermic effect of food, and EAT, exercise activity thermogenesis, and saw how even small changes in each of these can add up to very big shifts over time. We explored what it means to have a metabolically flexible system, the ability to switch seamlessly between burning carbs and fats, and why losing that adaptability can set the stage for fatigue, stubborn weight gain, and chronic disease. We also dismantled some of the biggest slow metabolism myths, separating the rare medical causes from the far more common lifestyle factors, and showed that your metabolism is not broken, rather it is adaptable and trainable over time. And finally, we distilled the practical steps you can start today. Move more throughout the day, protect and build lean muscle, fuel with enough protein, get quality sleep, and manage your stress. Because these are the levers you can pull to make your metabolism work for you. Awesome. This was just episode 1 of Metabolism Month and is the foundation for everything coming next. Over the rest of the month, we're going to tackle metabolic flexibility in more depth, dieting myths, fasting, performance fueling, and long-term metabolic health strategies. If you would like to understand your metabolism and learn how to influence it in the smartest, most sustainable ways, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss a single episode. This month is all about turning science into action, and I want all of you right here with me for every step. So, it's about that time of day again where I'm going to go hit the gym, and I hope you will as well. Remember, everyone, that consistency wins despite the fact that I'm not wearing the shirt today. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next episode.